Question of how do you emancipate yourself from slavery, and then who's responsible for doing that, wasn't answered in none of the psychology classes that I took. High school, senior year, I went to BA at Hampton University, so I went to a black school, historically black college, still learning about white people. Right? I got a PhD in white psychology. I got Freud, Skinner, Wilhelm. I got a bunch of old white men in my head that are supposed to help me help my people, but none of it steered me in a direction that was useful. So when I came back home to the south and west side of Chicago to try to connect and build, I had a bunch of stuff that I had to let go of to be able to find the truth that could really help me connect to the essence of who we are as people. So it was that line. That became a mission to me. How do you emancipate yourself from mental slavery? Free from the chains, technically can go where we want, but still have these chains on our minds. And how do you unlock them? How do you discard them? How do you destroy them? How do you teach your children a free, liberated theology, philosophy, pedagogy? How do you give them freedom in a world that's so committed to maintaining the power structures that require us to submit our minds to someone else, to have someone of authority, to be the picture of intelligence, the picture of pristine, the picture of beauty. How do I unlock those things in my mind? And for me, spirituality was central to that question. I grew up in the church, I still go to church. But what I've learned in trying to do work as a connector, as a healer, as a community builder, and think about the oneness of us all, that extends to what we all talk about, which is the oneness of the Creator. Or we all talk about serving one Most High God. We all say, and I grew up hearing people would reference a one God idea, and then they would say Buddha, Allah, Jehovah. No one ever said any African names of any gods when they reference a one God idea. And so the absence of that made me even more curious to that. Like, we had to have names for gods. We had to, like, we talk about the mightiest people on the planet, the parents of humanity. We had to have names of gods. And so I became really curious to go investigate that and really start to question what was the power and the medicine of the things that they removed from my tongue and my concepts that scared them so much, right? So then I would run towards it. So it starts to integrate all of these things, the culture, the language, the spirituality, into what does it mean, but the spark was that. How do you emancipate yourself and your people from mental slavery? Again, that quest, drives me to the day.
That's good. And then I was chuckling at your story over here. I said, because it's perspective, because some people would have took that 4 cases and called it a blessing. But no, I think mine was not a particular moment, but it was just like a phase, because again, I come from a really conservative, what we would call a conservative church. And they're very clear on that's politics. We don't deal with that. And so the more I started learning about reading James Cone and Howard Thurman, and then going to church doing the same thing, it didn't feel right. And I'm like, God, this isn't, something's not right, because I was in a way indoctrinated to believe something that didn't connect with what was happening in the world. And so I went through like the, and I feel like I'm still in this phase, but like towards the end of it. But I really had to deconstruct everything that I was taught from the time I was a child until that particular moment. So I went on this learning journey. And what that took me to is like really like my theology like isn't rooted in a certain doctrine, but it's really rooted in relationship. And so as I began to learn that, that is one, my relationship with God, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and then my relationship with people. And then once I began to put myself in that space, that transformed everything. Because it didn't matter how many songs we sung on the Sabbath, it didn't matter how much money was raised in the offering, like what mattered is how I was connecting with my community and with my people. And so I feel like that was like my transformative moment to where I still believe in the power of the Black church, but I don't believe in the religious construct of the Black church. And so that was I'm still in that journey. So it wasn't like one moment, but it was over time as you're reading and you're learning, like, no, y'all been taught a way that this is like your granddaddy's and your great granddaddy's theology, and not necessarily based on being informed by our tradition, like being formed and asking questions, and then you ask questions, they would say, "Oh no, don't worry about that. Well, that's voodoo," or anytime you think outside of what we've been traditionally taught. So, like for me, that moment was to say, like, no, I do need to learn more about Black people. I do need to learn more about my roots. And so, once I began that journey, it transformed how I engaged in community, because now it is about relationship and not the offering or the service or about the conferences. It's about community.
You are touching on some major points. And I feel like we can spend some time on that. Talking about the Black church and how that, has informs and the ways that it's helped and, hurt and limited some things. So, my goodness, you are a wealth of knowledge, but I definitely want to hear from you as well.
Okay, so I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the hood. Like when gangs would run like 20 blocks, the next 20 blocks is a different gang, and then they have a war. And if people see you cross on the divide, they have this silly divide line on the divide line, cross the tracks. They will automatically assume that you were with that gang in that area. And from grammar school through college, I've had a classmate get shot and killed. But I remember, taking a bus to the school, CPS, and if you see a dead body, somebody you know at like 13, that really does something to you. And like the doctor mentioned, I'm happy to hear this part of mental health and depression, is that, that's PTSD for a lot of people. And so I became, we call it a Black consciousness, right? I started seeing these things, and I'm like, the rest of Chicago they're not living like this. I don't think a white person is nervous about standing on the corner for the bus stop because it's a gang war. And so I remember getting my first job freshman year. It was called Jobs for Youth with Daily. And I was mad at my mom for making me wait in line. I was happy to miss school, but we had to wait in line in a hot sun for like 5 hours. And it was a minimum wage job, but it kept me busy from like 9 to 5 the whole summer. And throughout the day, I would be wondering, what am I missing, at the basketball court, my guys in the corner, like what am I missing? But when I would get home, they would be just coming out. But I got a paycheck coming in 2 weeks. So one summer, I actually saved up every check besides 2, and I bought my first car. But here were these guys who I, went to grammar school with, high school with, that's still on the block, going back and forth to jail. When it come down to it, you're probably making $1 an hour, and risking your life. has to be a higher purpose, higher being, like this, you know. So that's one of my examples.
Driving moments.
Driving moments, yeah. Driving moments, yeah.
And I think even you touched on like white people don't necessarily feel in certain neighborhoods like, am I allowed to stand here? What time am I allowed to be out here? What are all the things I have to consider, like think about all the time, and how that systemic violence just informs so much. And I think it kind of leads me to my next question. When you wake up and when you think about where we are in the world today, where we have been for the past 5 years, so COVID, the pandemic, the elections, the multiple world wars, the ongoing wars, you know, the list is really endless. What, and of course, then back to systemic violence, inflation, I mean, so many things that make living on a day-to-day so challenging. What spiritual practice or spiritual stories help keep you grounded, centered, and moving forward? What do you lean on in this kind of time that we're in? And that's tough, because I don't know, me and God are working on a lot right now, so feel free to approach that question however it feels best.
So for me, prayer is super important, and I know it may sound basic, but that's it. Like, me being in relationship with God is so important, because we talked about you did a whole roll call of issues, but when you wake up as a Black woman, you and a Black woman who is a faith leader in the Black church, and where I wake up in a space that doesn't necessarily value my voice or my leadership. So it's super important for me to be in connection and relationship with God, because God is my biggest cheerleader. God is my biggest boost of confidence. When the world is saying, shut up, stay in your place, or you bossy, you pushy, you aggressive, whatever else they want to say about me, as long as I'm in tune and I know I'm following the Spirit of God, like, man, I'm walking outside with all of the confidence and the boldness that I need. So really, for me to really be in tune, and then I think another thing that's important for me is making sure that I am educating myself and constantly evolving. A part of me deconstructing my theology is also me coming and saying I came for a place because I thought I could quote all of these scriptures that I had. Me going back to the basics and saying, like, you know what, it's so much that I don't know. And let me continue to be open to God, to constantly cultivate and transform, and to transform me. And as long as I stay into that space allows me to be a better human being, to be a better mother, advocate, wife, everything that I need to the world. But I have to constantly be in a place where God is feeding me and growing me and leading and guiding me.
So you have to dedicate that time. It's just like,
yeah, because if I know, that's when the ratchetness come out. I'm like, we know she's a
so it's important to be divinely led, divinely connected in that way. Yeah.
I'll go. One of the things that we are taught in the tradition that I study, E5, is that Earth is a marketplace. We come here to visit, we experience things, we gather lessons to take back to our home, which is another place, another way. Right? And so all the things that are happening, there's always going to be drama, mess, opposition. There's always going to be death, sickness, and there are lessons embedded in the trials that we experience here that we have unique obligations to do our part. We also are taught that everyone is born with a certain purpose, a certain path, a destiny, and that our role is to just figure out that and then do that with as excellent as possibility as you can. And if you commit to that, if you say, I have a path, I was born with a destiny, and every day I spend my time in prayer, in commitment, in community, walking my path, then there's nothing else to worry about. And so you can be aware of all the other things that are happening. But if you are doing what you are sent here to do, if your relationship with your Creator, if you are clear about what that is, and then you do that, then you do that. You sleep doing that. But we also learned that, like, we're talking about God and the positive aspects of that God, but there are also expressions of the divinity that are demonic, that are life blocking, right? Called ajobun in the tradition. There are things that are created just to stop life happening, right? So those forces have been here since every other force, and so we are clear that there are things that are here to obstruct, and there are things that are here to elevate, and that those things, those powerful beings, those aspects of God, those elements of divinity are more powerful than the demons. But we got to be clear that everything you listed is an expression of a spiritual warfare that is happening, that's been waged upon us. We got enemies that are doing rituals, and they make us think that you said voodoo, and they think they're sort of demonic, but they do it outright rituals right in front of our faces, and they're using their spiritual connections to demonic forces to control and occupy and to dominate and to kill and to murder. And so we see that for what it is, but having the access to our ancestors' understanding of the power that we have gives me confidence that we can defeat them, right? And so I don't feel like it's a war that we can lose once we find the tools, connect to the traditions, and then practice them. And so my faith is the trust that we are still here as the first people, and we will be the last people, and that we are the most powerful people on this planet. We've got to activate that. We've got to connect across traditions. We've got to remember that. We've got to remind ourselves who we are. And as long as they're, in control of our mind, our steps, and as long as we still bow into them, then we submit our power to them in ways that is about spirituality at its core. And so for me, the thing that keeps me encouraged is knowing who we are, who I am, who I'm connected to. The powers that guide me are more powerful than anything that is trying to obstruct me. And that gives me faith to keep moving, but also tools to practice, to engage in that warfare in ways that I feel are victorious. And I see signs of that every day, right? I see, we see the signs of the destruction, but I see signs of promise, possibility of light and joy, and those are the things that, again, drive me more than the darkness.
Wow, you got me going in a spiral right now. I'm like, man, I need to reevaluate some things. Okay, Harun.
Okay, in many faiths, we believe that God tests us for a certain reason. So in the Quran, it talks about God testing the ones who we love the most. And it talks about how for every hardship, there's a time of ease. So sometimes we forget though, because temporary can be 7 years, temporary can be half hour. As a Muslim, we are obligated to make those 5 daily prayers. So that does keep us in tune with our Creator daily. And our own Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said that when one part of the Ummah nation is hurting, it's like a whole body, like a body part is hurting. So we all, we all believe in the power of prayer. So the whole Muslim world is praying, and beyond is praying for our brothers and sisters in Palestine. So we know that, some type of peace is coming, but, only Allah knows, God knows when. But also, okay. And then from the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, his seerah, his biography, and his sunnah is his example. So they had times where they struggled, they didn't have food, they were oppressed, they were kicked out of their land. But over a period of 23 years, they persevered, and Islam was able to spread, throughout the earth. But there are many stories in between that kind of glaze over, where they lost battles. They didn't listen to the right command, and they ended up losing, and many Muslims died. So we also believe in something called the Qadar of Allah, which is like his predestination or predetermination. That's a heavy topic that I can't. But sometimes things we don't understand the meaning in the beginning. We may figure out later, but we may not know until that last day. But For me, helping people every day keeps me going. I work at a mosque. So I'm hearing the call to prayer every day, and it's really been a peaceful. You know, I came from corporate, so I work at not-for-profits in IT. So you can imagine like the currency change. But I have an overload of blessings. I mean, when some people come to me with their problems, I'm like, I don't have any problems. You know, like we have about 70 migrants in our community who came from West Africa through South America, through Mexico, then Texas, and they got shipped, you know. And so some of them are coming with absolutely nothing, you know, and just helping one of them like fill out an asylum application. You know, they're making so many prayers for me, and all I did was like, okay, what's your first name? But those little blessings add up, and the extreme amount of peace I get from that, I can't put a price on.
Thank you. And I think I just want to come back to the point that you said temporary can be 7 years. Temporary could be 20 years. But then once everything changes, you're good again, right? So that is, I'm really sitting with a lot now. I know that in a few minutes we will open it up to audience questions. I think we have a mic here. Yeah, so if you are interested in asking questions, you're welcome to do so. I want to talk about the services that you all provide. So we were just touching about that and the services that you're, the masjid is providing for the Senegalese population.
No, Mali, Senegal, Angola, Mauritania.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about like what are some of the services that your community is providing, you know, today or this year, or you know, has been focused on in the past few years. And is it more of a personal driver for you, or is it like a community-wide concern? So how that applies to what you're doing?
Okay, well, National we actually have housing for those in need. So we have housing for brothers and sisters. We have food program where we distribute food in the community. The first Friday every month, we have a community healthcare first Friday each month, the second Friday each month, I can't remember. Where it doesn't matter if they're documented or not, you know, they get blood tests and sugar, high blood pressure, things like that. And there's doctors that are there, nurse practitioners that can actually write prescriptions and assist with medical needs. But we do have one thing. A lot of the brothers and sisters are getting their citizenship through what's it called? Political asylum. But the one thing that's missing is the English language. So we have a young brother there that's now teaching English so that they can be able to gain some employment. I'm missing some things. We have a lot of community fundraisers for food to feed and you know, clothing. We had a really nice coat drive this winter. Because when it hit like 50 degrees, some of them were so cold. It was like we gotta do something about this, you know. Some people donate food every day, like hot food or food from a restaurant, so that they can have hot meals. I'm probably missing. We have a weekend Islamic school for kids on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm probably missing some.
That's okay. That's okay.
Thank you.
So I'm a psychologist again by training, but a lot of my work is integrating art, culture, movement into the healing spaces. So we're doing drum circles, djembe, and other West African percussions. We're doing comedic yoga for men every Sunday. Anybody interested in that? Really just looking at the diaspora's medicine and power and integrating that, but giving that back to, again, those of us who lost access to it. And that lost access because we forgot, because someone violently ripped us apart from it. And so for me, the healing for me is to put it back. We're doing using hip hop, which I consider to be a modern expression of the African, storytelling and rhythm and call and response is a very African sort of cultural expression, packaged in a new way. So all these things we just use in the therapeutic space, working in prisons and working, detention centers, community spaces, just to be able to create space where people can come and remember who we are, do it in ways that are healing, we connect to each other. And it's hard work. It's also always inspired by what we talk about, the obligation we have to our God, to our Creator, to our ancestors. There's times when you want to quit and give up. And anybody who work for Black people realize Black people, we hard to work for, right? It's hard to stay committed to us because we get in the way and we don't appreciate it. And, it's just hard. But then there's those days when I just want to stop. I remember that I made a commitment to Shango. You know what I mean? I said the reason I'm doing this is because a relationship that I have with my divinity that says you do what we brought you here for, and then we'll take care of you, which is conditional, which means if you don't do it, then like you on your own. And so the service is certainly motivated by the community of oneness, the obligation to the sacrifices that my ancestors made for me, the debt that I owe, but also my concept of what it means to offer good character to my Creator, which means to serve, which means to do my part, which means to be as innovative and creative and consistent, even when you're tired, even when you don't not appreciate it. But I mean, it's all a spiritual practice. So it's not a thing that you go do when you pray and then you go back to work. Like, it's all connected to an obligation, a connection, a relationship with the divinity that, again, holds everything together for me.
So I just want to quickly say something that I can't pass up, and then I'm going to answer the question. So one, you made a comment around like the opposing forces in this world, the doctor did. And I think that as we're on this faith panel, and we're talking about Black people, I think it's important for, especially for me, is that I really began to help Black churches to see white supremacy as the dominant forces. And a lot of times they still don't get it. I'm still working on it, but I think it is relevant in this conversation to bring up like that is as far as we're talking about the spiritual work that we're doing in community. We're literally fighting against whiteness, white supremacy, and it's not just a natural thing. It has to be something spiritual that's rooted within people, and that will cause tension in the fight against Black people. So I think that's important to name. But at Live Free, we organized the church to address issues at the intersection of public safety and criminal justice reform. So what that looks like for us is addressing issues of gun violence, police violence, and mass incarceration, and how we do that. We organize campaigns such as the creation of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, organizing for money to be invested in community-led violence reduction efforts. We organize around issues that serve as policies that are barriers to people who are formerly incarcerated. We organize around clearance rates, which is for us a level of police accountability. We also have a community healing resource center network where we provide funding for 13 organizations across the state to do the healing work of addressing trauma in communities. We also have a decarceration fellowship where we work with individuals who are recently released from IDOC to reimagine reentry, so that a lot of times when Black folks receive services, they think that we're supposed to receive whatever crumbs, but we're like, we don't bind that up because we want to make sure that people are treated with dignity. So what we do is train our fellows how to organize and advocate, build network, and make sure that we provide them with all of the resources they need to successfully re-enter. And at the end of it, they know how to organize and advocate in our neighborhood. So that's some of the work that we're doing to Live Free. And all of it is rooted in making sure that we have like this theological grounding behind it, and helping people to especially the churches, because we organize those who are just as impacted as well. But within the churches, really trying to transform how why we do this work. It's not that we're doing it because we're doing folks a favor. We're doing this because I'm not free until you're free. Thank you.
I know we have some questions from the audience, please.
Hi. So my name is Pinta Corain Moore. I'm delighted to be here. I was invited for my job. I work for the county with elected officials, and whenever I see something happening, I'm tied to it. And I was surprised to see my childhood friend, our partner here, who was brought up under the same tutelage. I mean, your father was so proud of you. His father was a student of my father, Karan, who empowered him to be a chiropractor. He's a progenitor of African culture here in the city of Chicago has since been deceased. But I recall being raised as a child wearing African garb. I'm sure it's, my chiropractor or and like he said, he would disdain because, for one, we would be so ostracized. There wasn't a lot of people or a lot of African Americans who were vegetarians, who were conscious about wearing natural hair, wearing African garb. So I remember going down the street from school, having on a long African garb and rolling it up halfway because I was embarrassed. And so now as an adult, I am proud of the heritage of what my parents told me. And to hear some of the things that I hear, some of the challenges and opportunities with the African community, I can see a parallel in the African American community. So it is very synonymous. Even with the Black church, I have been in Mississippi for about 22 years up until 2020, and I noticed that there was a construct of oppression, of systematic racism that I had to battle with because of how I was brought up, knowing my heritage and loving my African self, and then having to put that to the side when I came to the Christian. And so now, returning to my roots, trying to find the marriage between the two. Because I believe, I have a very powerful relationship with God, but I also embrace my African self and they are one. And so, my question would be to Dr. Hartman or Dr. Harvey. I know that you work in the prison system as do I. I know that you work in the prison system as do I. I am looking at reports daily that there are 7,000 people incarcerated in Cook County. And so it breaks my heart because over 67% of them are African American men. Just last week, I have facilitated a program in the Women's Department of Corrections with my 2 colleagues in our office to do a movie screening of The Color Purple with these mothers because they are mothers. So it was like 60 women. So bringing attention to them. But how do you be a purveyor of hope with the programs that you are doing with men who are incarcerated?
Thank you for that question. I mean, we were talking about the demons, right? We were talking about the systems that are set up for us to fail, and prison is an expression of that, just like slavery was an expression of that. So we have to see these physical manifestations, COINTELPRO, certain policies that are just the earthly symbol of a spiritual desire to keep us in a certain place. So I see prison like that. And people expect me to go into a prison and help the young man navigate this system and make better decisions and pull their pants up and go to school. But I start with systems analysis, which includes spirituality. I start with this is what happened to us, this is what's happening to us, these are who your real ops are, this is what it looks like, this is how they this is how they coordinate resources, this is the mechanism, this building we're in is a part of it, and there are technologies, there are mechanisms, there's tools that you can use to free yourself so that you can never come back in here again, right? And so that's the frame. The frame is we got, captive audiences, and it's really sometimes the only time that I get to sit with them in a quiet room without the phones and without, they detox for a moment. So there's an opening where they get to, where their spirit is yearning for something that I think that we need to be in there and feed them. Often, I think people take advantage of that moment in their time, and they go in there and they try to recruit. But I think that we really need to help them explore who they are, why they're here, and what they're up against. And I think that's a sadly beautiful opportunity to do so if we as a community see it as such and really go there and do God's work in a way that I think some of us are called to, but are afraid sometimes, or we get too busy, or all these other things that keep us from serving the most vulnerable amongst us, who have been the recipients of the worst of the trauma of the spiritual warfare, and we can't forget about them. And that's part of what the design is: throw them away, discard them, and forget about it. And then we participate in that unless we really pay attention to what our God has called us to do, which is to stay connected to the least of us. So that's just one of the spaces that I do what I consider to be a living prayer, and to allow them to tap into that which is divine in them, which the world has tried its best to stomp away. But once you light a spark, right, then, God does the rest.
I'm Admiral Nelson Bay, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak. I'm a medical astrologist at the apex of German New Medicine. And I contend that there are no injections that are harmless to your physical or psychic well-being. This is a very important fact to understand, because in the wake of this COVID-19 stupidity, this pandemic, there was very little of any clear guidance, aside from that issued by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in that lecture entitled The Criterion, to give us some sense as to what we should do. For example, we should not take any injection that is assigned to this COVID-19 viral, what the hell they said it was. Not to have any of that. I would contend that we shouldn't inject ourselves or subject our children to the indignity of being injected at all with any kind of vaccine, injection, or any other such thing. The natural order of things is to let food be our medicine. And that's clean food and the highest quality of water, which in my opinion is ozonated water. They ozonate water in Switzerland and North Texas. I intend to do it big time at 85th and the lakefront, the old South Chicago barge canal underneath it, and build a swimming pool on top of it, about 4.5 feet deep throughout. And then there will, of course, be a bridge that we're going to put there, and people will be able to go straight through on Lakeshore Drive, north and south. I'm the next mayor of Chicago. I'm the next governor of Illinois. I'm the next vice president of the United States with my president, Donald J. Trump. I'm positioning myself to establish an effective parallel economy that will take power in as much as soon will the president order be rolled up and a new one spread out instead. And he explains the world's equilibrium has been upset through the vibrating influence of this this new world order. Mankind's order of life has been revolutionized. The agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the light of which mortalizes living.
Thank you. You want to share your name again?
Andrew C.M. Nelson. I style myself as Admiral Nelson Bay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'm grateful to be speaking. My name is Loretta Ikanen. I'm a psychologist, and I recently completed a research on cultural inclusion and sensitivity in substance use disorder intervention, and particularly for harm reduction. And something very interesting finding from my research says, I interviewed about 20 people with living and lived experience with substance use. And the question was, or is, when you have crisis, when you're going through your challenges, where do you go to seek help first? Where is the first place to go to seek help? And something thing that kept coming is I go to church to speak with my reverend. I talk to family. And the next question was, why are we not accessing the available resources to help support your substance use challenges? And what I kept hearing was, I believe in my faith. I believe I can be healed spiritually. I believe I can pray and God will answer my prayers. And families were saying, we'll trust God to take this addiction away. My question is, there is so much connection with mental health, general well-being, and the faith of the African person. What are we doing in our respective churches, mosques, our traditional settings to support the epidemic of substance use disorder? In the whole of Illinois, as of 2022 data, we had over 4,000 overdose deaths. In Chicago alone, we have over 2,000 overdose deaths. I currently work with UIC, and I work for a project called COIP. Some of you may know them. We do a lot of work on the west side with people with substance use issues. We link them to harm reduction, safe supplies. We link them to housing, to food, and all that. What is the faith-based institutions doing? I also know that the churches and the mosques and the traditional, healers do not want to hear about people struggling with substance use issues. It's a taboo. It's forbidden. You're supposed to be resilient, you don't fall sick, you don't use substance. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, tomorrow I'll start using heroin or something. Nobody does that. People look for a way of escape from their depression. So the question is, what are we doing? Because the African person looks up to the faith-based institution for support. Thank you.
It's a great question. And we know that opioid addiction challenges a lot of our young youth, but I want to also expand that to gambling addiction. Sports betting is something super frequent now that's impacting everyone. So I like the question related to addictions and removing some of the stigma around Western, whatever it may be. I would love to hear you are, not all of you are showing up in traditional and non-traditional ways as leaders in religious communities. I think that's a wonderful question, how you approach that. And then I think we have one more fight. We are pressed for time, so we might have room for one more question, depending on how thorough these answers are. And if you don't feel, equipped, that's okay too, but please.
Well, Islam, there's a saying it was a story about the Prophet's time, Muhammad, where a companion, he didn't tap his camel or his horse, and then he just went about his business. And naturally, his horse or camel ran away. So he went to the Prophet Muhammad and said, hey, I prayed to Allah that my camel stayed. He said, did you tie it up? And he said, no. He said, tap the rope first, then you depend on Allah. So as Muslims, we don't just sit around and just pray only. We go to the doctor and pray that this operation will heal me, this medicine will heal me. And if there's, we also have other, there's a book called Medicine of the Prophet, which is talking about Ibn al-Qayyim, where it talks about different remedies. But one thing that we do is cupping. It's called the wet cupping, where they put the cup on your back and suck the skin up and actually slice the blood out. I've done it myself about 5 times for sleep issues, migraines, stuff like that. And I felt like I floated off the table when I was done. I had energy for like 5 months. But the point is, in all our communities, people are coming from prisons. They may have gone to prison as a Muslim or come out as a Muslim. I just had to make 15 phone calls this Tuesday about a young brother dying in the Dixon Correctional Facility. And the grandma said, look, I ain't got no money, do whatever you want to them. So they're gonna cremate her, which is, we don't do that in Islam. So we had to contact whoever we could to a family member to take his body so they can be buried as a Muslim, which is right upon us as a lot of our brothers and sisters. So we don't just say, make a supplication that only that God will remove your sickness, but you have to do something. I was happy to see the table out there about kidney disease because, it's more dialysis places in our neighborhoods than Walgreens. It's like, what did it come overnight? And what's the solution before getting to that stage of them needing dialysis? Is I think somebody said eating healthier. The one general brother said, Admiral. Yeah, so no, it's not necessarily a taboo in our community because we have many ailments and illnesses that exist today in this world. Some of our kids have special needs. We ask Allah to heal them and bless them and help them through this physical therapy or this kidney stone removal. And we don't just sit back and pray. We actually do things. And like I said, fortunately, we have a community healthcare clinic that comes once a month. And our imam is constantly saying, look, even if you were at the doctor last week, please at least have your sugar check, your blood check, cholesterol, etc., because you don't want it to creep up on you.
I'll speak quickly so that I want to get to the last two questions. There is certainly a lot more ways to go, but in my experience, my view of this, we are making more headway towards having mental health conversations in the church. I personally have been getting invited to panels to do workshops in churches more often than has ever happened. And so that stigma is starting to reduce, which is good news. People are encouraged from the pulpit to seek therapy and go to the counselor and to the pastor at the same time. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. It's not enough, and I hear your frustration. We're not doing enough. No one's doing enough. And part of it is because we're up against so much. So what you're describing, I would still couch in the same conversation of chemical warfare, which is an extension of spiritual warfare, which means that if we are just trying to get the symptoms of a problem, serve them, to give out blankets or soup, and I think a lot of churches have that approach. It's like a service to an individual without connecting to the systemic root of the problem. And I think that's why we're seeing the numbers increase because we're not really delving into what is the source of that problem. And I think that we need more churches at those tables to make policy, to advocate, to do things other than just like clean people up and help them get through the week. So those two things come to mind, but I think there's more of a relationship between the church, mental health, substance use that is growing. And I think that if you walk into any church as a psychologist and say, I want to offer my services, I would imagine that everyone would be very happy to have you.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I often stand on this scripture that says, what does the Lord call me to do? And that's to do mercy and to do justice. I think a lot of times with the substance issues, and my mother, I thank God that she was delivered for her addiction, but I grew up seeing my mama for like 21 years dealing with an addiction. And so she would say that her spirituality was huge and that God took it away from her, but I will also say that she would say is that she did receive the resources that she needed to heal. And so it's just not about the treatment, but we also have to do a better job of trying to figure out how do we uproot some of the underlying issues that exist within our communities, because it's not just our response to drugs, but if you think about how many prayer visuals we have in response to gun violence, like we're not gonna pray gun violence away. The same way we're not gonna pray mass incarceration away. So it is a shift of us moving more into like really putting the spiritual challenge in the church to address the systemic injustices by walking humbly before God, loving mercy, and doing justice.
Can I just piggyback real quick on a couple of things? So I'm really happy for the conversation about mental health as a Chicago Public Schools teacher. I mean, I taught like 20% of the time. The rest was breaking up fights and trying to get young people to respect themselves and to teach them that y'all not that different from each other. But the anger that they were getting over like a Laffy Taffy, and if this kid was gang affiliated, they would go into the neighborhood, like, well, but now Laffy Taffy. This mental health issues in there, but like the sister said, it's underlying things in there. Where some people take these drugs, they feel like it's self-healing, and they make that mistake, and now they're hooked. But I think one solution is more people of faith need to be just like this whole diversity, education, equity and inclusion came up more after the George Floyd unfortunate incident. We need more people of faith that do take up counseling and psychology to be able to deal with, have a spiritual balance in there with it as well. But we also need more mental health in the public school systems. Wow.
Can I just say, I thank God for that, because what also happens is where I think that in general in community, not just the church, but in community, we need like more peer-to-peer support, because what also happens is that sometimes when you want to help and you're not equipped to help, you can do more harm by helping and without having the proper training and tools. So I do think it's also important for like everybody in this audience included that we there are workshops and trainings where there's like peer-to-peer models. So where if a clinician isn't readily available, but there is someone who's not going to give you some bad theology or some bad teaching, but making sure that we all have the training. So it's not again just not the church, but as an uncle, as an auntie, as a cousin, we should be able to have these conversations and be able to support individuals as well. To a certain extent, we're not all. Although I'm a social worker by training, but everybody isn't clinically trained. So I do think it's important to make sure that we do more training as a community, as Black folks, as a community, to have those conversations.
Hi, hello. My name is Godwin. I came in kind of late, but I got a gist of what this convention was for. I heard the lady that talked about incarceration. I heard the lady that talked about mental health and substance abuse. But my main question out of all this, and this is a big closing question, is for you guys in the panel, what future do you think, 10 years, 20 years from now, what future are you seeing in the Black community or in the African community? Are we going to progress from where we are right now, or are we going to keep staying and seeing the same thing? Because I hear a lot about fake this, fake that, fake this, fake that. But a lot of times whenever I see some of my brothers, some of my sisters getting gunned down, getting killed, or doing the killing, or doing the gunning down, they come from, like, you go to their homes, they got like a cross in their living room, they got like a mom who goes to church every time, they got all kinds of stuff when it comes to faith. However, at the end of the time, you see most of the younger generation, or most of the people around that community, they're always doing the most crimes. And then when they finally get incarcerated, they start turning a new leaf, and then when they come out, they go back to the same thing they're doing. And it always boggles me. It's like, oh, we talk about faith. I mean, I come from a Christian family. We always preach the good will of God. We always do our Sunday schools. We always do our Sunday go to church and all that stuff. But at the same time, there are sometimes when you see some of these things, and you tend to realize that some people, and I'm not chastising anyone for this, but some people use faith as an excuse to do some of the things they do. And then they use faith to escape the responsibilities of the things they do. And every time it always gets me wondering, like, what is the future looking like? Is this going to be the same old, where every time you see on the news, somebody, a Black child got killed, we all gather, do the vigil, and then we keep doing the same thing, nothing changes. It's like, I'm just asking, what future do you see in the Black community? Do you see some improvements, or do you see the same old?
Thank you. And that will be our last question for the rest of the day. So I also want to, and I think we might be a little bit tight on time, but I also want to give this opportunity. So to reiterate, his question is, how do you hope that your work inspires transformation in this lifetime? And if you have a better example of in the past 10 years, so either in the future 10 years or past 10 years, what changes have you seen? And then also want to wrap up with any opportunity you want to speak about the work that you do, your religious practice, or if there's anything we didn't get to touch on today. So I guess final words about the future, the past, today.
I'll start. Thanks again for this conversation. It's been awesome. Hope we get to stay in touch. I love everything y'all working on. I'm gonna respond to the question. I'm not gonna answer it. My response is, I don't think about it in that way. 10 years from now, and the global elevation of the African diaspora is too big for me, and I get overwhelmed by that. I think instead, whether or not we are better in 10 years, if I have anything to do with it, I'm gonna do everything I can in my power to move us in that direction. And if everyone is doing that, then I have hope. If everyone is noticing the problems and complaining about it and then turning it off, then I think that we will just see the same cycles. So the question, I think, it depends on what we do, and not abstractly, but like what we do. Right? Whoever the we is that is in the sound of your voice, if they are inspired by your actions that day to do better, to contribute to something that's going to elevate us, then that is as much power as you will ever have. And if we are all moving in that direction, then I have hope. There's some days that I feel very afraid of what's happening. Some days I feel very excited. That depends on even what I do in that day, who I surround myself with, what I focus on, and so I approach it in a way where it's not like I'm not hoping nothing happens. I'm gonna do my part to do the work, and then that's as much as I can do. That's it. That's all I got. I'm not gonna wonder or worry. I'm not gonna spend any time sort of in this esoteric idea. I'm gonna today. What can I do today to make sure that 10 years from now I did my part to make sure that we were better than we were 10 years ago. And that's as much as I will spend my time thinking about it. Hey, thank y'all for your time. Y'all can find me on Instagram, I got a website, drbarcarpet.com, Facebook. So if y'all want to connect or do work, collaborate, please feel free.
Well, thank you. The question that the brother asked, it was like 6, 7, 8-fold. I mean, from just depending on faith alone, and then the way you see yourself in 10 years. But I mean, us having this conversation as different faiths from the African diaspora is a nice. Maybe it wouldn't happen, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that. But the more people become, I'm not gonna say educated, just like degree based. I mean, like it's a lot of free money, free training out there to become like a career technical education. Like this whole thing with the green movement, with learning how to install solar panels, learning how to fly drones. We need to be more conscious and do research about all of these different programs with free money that can help out our youth. I mean, a sister gave me a flyer the other day about a training in Austin where it was for 18 to 24-year-olds. It was auto mechanic, like wood shop, solar panel thing again, and at the end, they would get an $8,000 grant to start an entrepreneurship, the small business. But the beauty about technology, though, and these phones, that it's making everybody global reporters and journalists. So we're seeing a big change in Africa with kicking France out. That's amazing. And it's spread to other nations. So people are becoming more conscious. But I don't know. It's a 10-year. Like I hate that interview question too. Like, what are you doing? I want your job, but I can't get. You don't hire me now. But I don't know. But in 10 years, I would like to see less incarceration, less guns on the street, less violence. Period. Black on black violence. More people coming out of high school, our public high schools, ready to work. I've seen with my own eyes, many people have literacy issues with a high school diploma. They have to take a remedial English in college to catch up with what they missed in high school. That's a big, big problem. So I'm sorry to ramble, but I mean, I tried to answer. I can't answer that question. I can't answer. But that was a nice question. Yeah. And I'd like to thank everybody. kind of a feeling, and I was nervous as heck coming up here, but alhamdulillah. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and hopefully be invited to more. And, it's nice meeting you all. Great audience. I'd love to see our people get together in a positive manner. Alhamdulillah.
And I'll say again, also thank you for inviting me and being a part of this conversation. So one thing, I mean, yes, it was 6 or 7 questions in one, but one thing I do want to point out is I'm a strong believer in faith that works is dead. So when I swing my punch and my strength, it might not go far because I ain't lifting that much. I'm training, but I ain't lifting that much. But when I got the power of God behind me and my faith, my punch is landing. And so I say that because it's so important for us not to get discouraged in our faith or to sort of blame it and say, y'all faith folks are always talking about faith. Because us faith folks who are doing what we say we are doing and doing what we believe in and living it out, our faith is landing our punches. And I think it's important for us to know that there is hope. As long as we continue in our faith, there is hope as long as our faith is keeping us pushing when we can't see what's ahead of us. When it looks, all we see is despair, all we see is brokenness. Our faith is helping us to continue to walk in the darkness. So I thank God for our faith and continue to guide us. But what I do know is that I think that if we continue to stand up and move in the direction that we see in 10 years, we can change the trajectory of what people are saying is happening now. People say that the black population is declining in Illinois. People say that Chicago, most of us won't be able to afford to live in the Chicago land if we continue on this trajectory. But we do have the power of faith to challenge that narrative and to push back. So I just want to continue to encourage everybody to keep doing it, but you got to keep swinging. It's not going to happen unless you swing. And we have to continue. And then the last thing I want to say is that even with the youth that's outside, because a lot of youth who are disconnected with their faith because we're not connecting with them. So in my tradition, we also preach how can they hear and believe if there's no preacher? So we have to be the preachers that's going out, building the relationships and making the connections so that they are in tune with their faith and in tune with their people and that they have a guidance for life.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of your day and just feel honored to have been in the presence of y'all. Thank you.
We're actually about to